Chapter 31. On March 21st, 1839, I gave my first sermon on temperance. I explained how alcohol was destroying not only their lives, but that of their starving children. "I cannot fight this battle alone," I challenged. "We must raise up a great army with Jesus Christ as our general. He will bless us and lead us to victory. For the next 3 days we will fill our ranks, so that giant destroyer of your bodies and souls can be driven from our midst." The next day, 75 men who were considered to be among the most desperate drunkards of Beauport enrolled themselves under the banner of temperance. On the second day, 200 joined the battle. By the third day, 300 more took the pledge. During these 3 days, more than 2/3 of my people had publicly taken the pledge of temperance, solemnly said in the presence of God before their altars. As a great number of people from the surrounding parishes and even from Quebec had come to hear me the third day through curiosity, the news of that marvelous work spread very quickly throughout the whole country. The press, both French and English, were unanimous in their praises and felicitations. But when the Protestants of Quebec were blessing God for that reform, the French Canadians, at the example of their priests, denounced me as a fool and a heretic. The indignation of the bishop knew no bounds. A few days after, he ordered me to his palace. "You have compromised our holy religion by introducing a society whose origin is clearly heretical. Last evening the venerable Grand Vicar de Mars told me that you would sooner or later become a Protestant, and that this was your first step. Do you not see that the Protestants only praise you? My first thought when an eyewitness told me yesterday what you had done was to interdict you. I have been prevented only by the hope that you will yourself dissolve that anti-Catholic association which smells of heresy and will not be tolerated by your bishop." I answered, "My lord, have you forgotten I was absolutely against being appointed curate of Beauport? And God knows that you have only to say a word and I will give you my resignation. But I will put a condition to that resignation, that I will be allowed to publish before the world that the Reverend Mr. Begin, my predecessor, has never been troubled by his bishop for having allowed his people during 23 years to swim in the mire of drunkenness, and that I have been disgraced by my bishop and turned out from that same parish for having been the instrument by the mercy of God in making them the most sober people in Canada." The poor bishop felt at once that he could not stand his ground. He also saw that his threats had no influence over me, and that I was not ready to undo what I had done. After a painful silence of a minute or two, he said, "Do you not see that the solemn promises you have extorted from those poor drunkards are rash and unwise? They will break them at the first opportunity. Their future state of degradation, after such an excitement, will be worse than the first." I answered, "I would partake of your fears if that change were my work, but as it is the Lord's work, we have nothing to fear. As to the prophecy of the venerable Mr. de Mars, that I have taken my first step towards Protestantism by turning a drunken into a sober people, the venerable Grand Vicar would do better to come and see what the Lord is doing in Beauport than to slander me and turn false prophets against its curate and people. My only answer is that Protestants on this question understand the Word of God and have more respect for it than we Roman Catholics. It is high time we open our eyes to our false position. Would your lordship be kind enough to tell me why I am denounced and abused when Father Matthew is publicly praised by his bishops and blessed by the Pope for covering Ireland with temperance societies?" At that very moment, the sub-secretary entered to tell the bishop that a gentleman wanted to see him immediately on pressing business, and the bishop abruptly dismissed me to my great comfort and his apparent relief. With the exception of the secretary, Mr. Cazault, all the priests I met that day and the next month either gave me the cold shoulder or overwhelmed me with their sarcasms. One of them, who had friends in Beauport, was bold enough to try to go through the whole parish ridiculing me by saying that I was half crazy, and the best thing the people could do was to drink moderately to my health when they went to town. But at the third house he met a woman, who, after listening to the bad advice he was giving to her husband, said to him, "I do not know if your pastor is a fool in making people sober, but I know you are a messenger of the devil. When you advise my husband to drink again, you know that he was one of the most desperate drunkards in Beauport. You personally know of the blows I have received from him when he was drunk. How poor and miserable we were. How the children had to run on the streets half naked and beg in order not to starve with me. Now that my husband has taken the pledge of temperance, we have every comfort. My dear children are well fed and clothed, and I find myself as in a little paradise. If you do not go out of this house at once, I will turn you out with my broomstick." And she would have fulfilled her promise, had not the priest had the good sense to disappear double quick. 4 months after the foundation of the society in Beauport, peace, happiness, abundance, and industry took the place of the riots, fighting, blasphemies, and squalid misery. The gratitude and respect of that noble people for their young curate knew no bounds.